It's a top priority for the administration. Unfortunately, these sorts of attacks are becoming more frequent. They're here to stay, and we have to work in partnership with business to secure networks to defend ourselves against these attacks.
They are here to stay, and tonight on the 10, the nation's top leaders in government and law enforcement are racing against the clock, trying to gain control of the nation's largest fuel pipeline.
After a ransomware attack paralyzed the transportation of oil and gas up and down much of the East Coast, the security and economic consequences, Tim, of this attack are vast. But the truth is really that this is just one of the latest ransomware attacks.
Happens more often than you think. Estimated that ransomware attacks happen every 14 seconds. That's 2 attacks since we started talking. Happens like that. Check that out. In an instant, everything changes, and it often catches each victim off guard.
And while most cyber attacks don't halt the U.S. oil economy, they can certainly devastate a business or paralyze a government entity. All problems that, of course, could affect your hometown, your school system, even a small business.
And that is tonight's starting point. Now, before we get into all of that, let's bring you up to speed on what's being called the worst cyber attack on American infrastructure. The target in all this, the Colonial Pipeline, a private firm that controls, get this, 45% of the East Coast fuel. We're talking about the transportation of everything from gas to diesel to jet fuel from down in the Texas Gulf Coast all the way to New York Harbor.
And the FBI has identified the culprit of this as a criminal group of hackers known as DarkSide. Now, DarkSide is believed to be operated by a Russian cyber gang, and today marks the 5th day in a row that it has had complete control over Colonial's computer network. What a nightmare. The magnitude of this attack is really so big that it's prompted a rare emergency declaration from the federal government, which ramps up alternative transportation routes for oil and gas.
The Department of Energy is working directly with Colonial to get the pipelines back online and operating at full capacity as quickly and safely as possible.
You see the president talking about it, you know it is serious.
Sure.
And we all know that there are dark places on the web filled with lots of cyber criminals.
But in a sea of bad guys, DarkSide kind of stands out. Think of DarkSide as a professional group of hackers. We don't mean professional because they're in suits and ties and prim and proper. We mean they are incredibly organized in how they do this. DarkSide even develops and markets hacking tools and then sells that to other criminals who could sometimes carry out the attacks themselves.
Yeah, and this is where it gets a little weird. They even have a code of conduct which details who and what targets are acceptable to them. DarkSide claims that they do not harm protected organizations like hospitals, schools, universities, and nonprofit organizations. Now, the criminals they might sell to, who knows? DarkSide, though, also claims it donates a portion of its profits to charities, although some of those charities have turned down those contributions.
That makes sense. You wouldn't want that dirty money. Also has apparently a help desk. Yeah, a call-in number for victims. Now, listen, this is not actually to help people from becoming a victim. It's actually help for the ransom negotiations themselves and to make the extortion as straightforward as possible. Crazy.
It really is. And DarkSide may be very sophisticated, but really at its core, it's essentially operating like almost every ransomware attack usually does. It often starts off simple, like an email that might look like someone you know, telling you to visit a website or download a file, kind of like the way you get hacked on Facebook, right? Then the next thing you know, malicious codes quickly spread through your computer, encrypting thousands of files. And once they're in, they can take over the whole network, essentially locking down every computer or server linked to the infected one and demanding a payment in order to regain that access to the information.
I think that's when you're supposed to call the help desk. We actually spoke with Dr. Eric Cole, a cybersecurity expert and the author of Cyber Crisis. Cole actually started his career as a professional hacker for the CIA, would actually break into computers and networks for the government. Then he moved on to helping organizations implement effective security measures to try to protect themselves. So he truly knows this topic inside and out. And he says the attack on Colonial Pipeline isn't just professional, it's also perfectly timed.
They were waiting for the perfect opportunity to get access to all their data, and now they're holding it ransom. And Colonial really has 2 options: either pay the ransom or rebuild their entire network from scratch.
So listen, right now, Colonial Pipeline working with a private cybersecurity consultant to assess potential damage, try to figure out when it's safe to bring that pipeline back online.
Yeah, and hopefully this gets figured out, kind of quickly. It's already been 5 days, but this massive breach really got us thinking all about these ransomware attacks. They can make every computer or even your smartphone a target. And there has been a lot of ransomware attacks in the headlines recently, more than you probably realize.
Yeah, like when a cyber gang hacked into personnel files of some of Washington, D.C.'s Metro Police Department, even threatened to release confidential and damaging information like the names of police informants and undercover officers. Or how about Presque Isle, Maine, where the city's server was broken into and a cyber gang threatened to release files from the Presque Isle Police Department if they didn't pay up.
And the public school system in Haverhill, Massachusetts was crippled when a hack attack froze remote learning platforms. So if you think remote learning was stressful, imagine that. And those 3 examples all happened just last month. And Tim, this seems to be a growing problem, especially for these public entities that potentially may be underfunded.
We mentioned it happens more often than you think. We actually reached out to the FBI in Boston, who told us that last year, 2020, there were more than 90 reports of ransomware in Massachusetts, Maine, New Hampshire, and Rhode Island. That's up from 53 reports just 2 years earlier. Get this, the highest ransom paid by one company in our area was a whopping $2.5 million.
Yeah, that is not a drop in the bucket at all. It's a staggering number that may have you wondering if your business or company that you either may own or work for, you may be wondering, is it protected enough? We spoke with Jacqueline Lawler, the CEO of Retrofit Technologies, which specializes in this kind of IT support and security for companies. She says this recent uptick is not surprising.
This is not new at all. We've been really seeing the uptick, I would say, the last 3 years, and we've noticed it in schools, along with police and fire, and a couple of nonprofit organizations.
Certainly troubling stuff there. We've seen examples of ransomware attacks at schools in our area as well. Haverhill, Leominster, Chicopee, Springfield, just to name a few, just in Massachusetts. Security expert Todd McGee says on the black market, Social Security numbers, credit card numbers are easy to recreate. They're very popular to steal too. But children information, that's particularly valuable to cyber gangs.
Unfortunately, the victim doesn't know it until tens of thousands of dollars of expenses have been ran up. Or perhaps there's an apartment that's been rented out in their name and they default on a payment.
Yeah, and whether it's city servers, police departments, schools, whatever it may be, what can be done to try and protect this information from these kinds of attacks? Well, Jacqueline Lawler says there are several steps to take here.
Never pay the ransomware. So there are ways to avoid it. Yes, you can call the FBI, but there are actually companies out there like Retrofit. If you call and if you have a strong active backup, that's the most important at the end of the day, is making sure that you're backing up your company's data every day.
And she says with her clients, she actually recommends doing it every hour. So if you have a very busy business and you don't want to lose any of your information, that's what she's suggesting, because this really is your best protection.
I mean, that's great. Every day is probably enough to start, especially if you're not doing it already.
Yeah, I mean, I shouldn't say that out loud. I need to back up more often.
Jackie backs up all the time, cyber hackers, if you're listening. Listen, not just companies and public organizations that should be implementing these protections. It's really everyone, like Jackie.
We really need to understand that this is real. These individuals, they may go for brand names, but there's nothing to say that they're going to come after the little guy out there, individual homeowner, the individual employee that's working from home.
And when you think about it, probably not that surprising, but the pandemic also creating a perfect storm for these kinds of crimes. The professional hacker we heard at the top of the show, Eric Cole, now works for good, says if you're one of the millions of people working from home at the moment, it could make you extra vulnerable.
Now with the pandemic, most companies have 15,000 people that opened up remote offices. And every one of them are now accessible from the internet. They're responsible for their own security. A lot of people from home are using outdated systems.
Listen, don't panic. Like companies, there are some simple steps we could all take to be a little better protected, whether you're working from home or in the office.
Or at Starbucks, right? Let's start with how to protect our personal laptops, which have certainly gotten a lot of use over the past year.
One thing that is very easily put in place by a homeowner is virtual private networks. So the use of VPNs, again, subscription-based packages that are out there. There are a number of them.
In addition to VPNs, how about those annoying software updates we all get? The right-hand corner of your screen of your computer, maybe on your phone. Be honest with me here. You click update in an hour or update tomorrow. You keep putting it off every time you turn the computer on. Listen, those are usually to fix bugs in operating systems for our phones and our computers. So taking those few minutes to install it now, that's just a good idea.
Yeah, it certainly is. And experts say that you should also pick strong passwords. That's important. Again, back up that information, enable pop-up blockers, and look into investing in security software. So actually pay for that virus protection. And hopefully all these tips can really help you get back to normal, kind of like we just did there on the 10.
Yeah, we already mentioned it, but it happens way more frequently than you probably imagine, and hopefully you haven't been a victim of it. But think about this. We just spent 10 minutes talking about this topic. In that short time, at least 42 cyber attacks likely took place around this country just in the last 10 minutes. So update your system. Make sure you have the cybersecurity in there on your laptop and on your phone. And change your password every once in a while. Don't use the same one for 80 different things.